Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It seems as if everyone has joined so far. So let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. Thank you for taking the time out and being here today. My name is Elma Clark, and I'm a Customer Success Manager in Higher Education here at LinkedIn. And I'll be joined today by Jim Lee, our guest speaker, and my colleague, Wes Pompey, who's an account director also in higher education. Wes and I both work with universities and colleges throughout the Southeast. Today, we are presenting Doubling Professional Development on Your Campus and how Georgia State University created an asynchronous online program during the pandemic. Now, you may have noticed, I mentioned that our guest speaker today will be Jim Lee. There has been a slight change to our panel. Unfortunately, Doug Samuels, who was our original guest speaker, had to attend a family matter and is not able to join us. But luckily for us, Doug's colleague, Jim Lee, has volunteered to join in Doug's absence. So thanks, Jim, for stepping in the last minute. But before we start, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items, and some of it Anna has mentioned in the chat. Firstly, don't worry, we will be sending you a recording of this webinar as soon as it's available, and today's presentation deck as well. So keep an eye out for that in a couple of days. Also, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of our discussion. Also, feel free to interact with each other in the chat, share your thoughts, any questions that you may have for each other, and do a little bit of networking if possible. For those of you just joining us for the first time, welcome, and know that we love hearing from you. So let's get started with our session today. For today, I should say. Today, the format for the event is an interactive session. We like to keep these interactive and engaging. And the conversation will be between our moderator, who will be Wes, and our guest speaker, Jim Lee, followed by questions from you, our audience, at the end. Now, without further ado, let's hear from Jim and Wes. Jim and Wes, please take a few moments just to tell us a little bit about who you are, where you've been, where you're going, and your roles in education. And we'll go ahead and start with Jim.
Can everybody hear me okay?
We can. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me. I'm Jim Lee, as she mentioned. I'm an L&D, or Learning and Development Specialist at Georgia State University. Also wear the hat of Administrative Coordinator and Human Resources Professional in the Talent Management Office, or TMO, at Georgia State. I coordinate communication, create training and development programs, and manage university certificate programs for staff and faculty. Administer the learning and management system and course design and assessment feedback. As an analytical innovator focused on learning, creativity, and human development, I employ knowledge and experience of adult learning theory, instructional design and technology, and performance improvement. Also, I build on my classroom and teaching experience and instructional design credentials to create and deliver courses and presentations that enhance learning and engagement. And as a side note, I love traveling, and so being a lifelong learner also, I value cultural and diverse insights from all around the world. So I've had the opportunity to visit many places and bring back some knowledge on where we are now. My academic background is in public affairs and education, where my inspiration originated when I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Jim. Wes?
Hi, everyone. Wes Pompey here. And as you can see from my photo, I've let my hair grown out over the past year and a half, so I should probably update that. But I am a partnership manager in the higher ed space here at LinkedIn. I've been with the company for about 6.5 years now, handling, as Alma said, alongside Alma, our academic partnerships in the Carolinas and Georgia. So actually come from the lynda.com days, if you're familiar with lynda.com at all, and kind of how that evolved into LinkedIn Learning. And just kind of watching the evolution of the resource over the years has really been a joy, and kind of a big aspect of why I enjoy my job and what I get up and do every day. the kind of continuing off of that is really learning from schools that we partner with, and how can we utilize the LinkedIn ecosystem to make them that much more effective and bolster student outcomes, really, dig into like what we're talking today, professional development. And so just kind of, seeing these unique ways that schools utilize the different resources in tandem with other resources they have in place, programs they have in place, is just something I really enjoy. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today, Jim, and really kind of looking at, okay, the asynchronous online professional development program, how did you get it to develop or double participation during the last year, and really unpacking that. And hopefully everyone on the call today can learn a little bit more about, hey, we have something similar in place, or we're looking to implement something like this. So I hope we get some really good takeaways. I'm excited to learn some things myself. And to, really just kind of kick us off, and we were chatting a little bit about this. The program, it was developed under this idea that professional development is really a moving target. And so kind of want to talk about that and what that means to you, what that means to Georgia State.
That's a good question. Since we're focused on, in my office and area, on learning and development, we know that we attempt to meet learners where they are. And so when that's a moving target in terms of their increasing and upskilling their skills, and also looking for different opportunities, and also onboarding new employees, that's one way we're sort of looking at the moving target. And so as staff members, as they upskill and learn new content, they develop new professional goals and opportunities. And so LinkedIn Learning, they provide tons of diverse content that covers a number of skills that are very attractive for our staff, students, and faculty. And so the excellent selection lends us to the opportunities that we can move on and offer to the people that we serve. And so I think that the idea of professional development, it being a moving target, can mean many different ways, but I think that that's one way we're going to sort of meet them where they are.
Yeah, and especially kind of in this age of the digital economy and the shelf life of skills, and kind of seeing where is the world going, and how do we kind of predict the future, or because we don't have crystal balls. That would be nice, but and also kind of looking at how do we know what we don't know that we need to know. And that's kind of how I view the moving target and the professional development aspect of it as well. And it really ties into even realigning what professional development means, and kind of the growth of professional development, and tying into personal development too. So really looking at, hey, well-being is a professional development growth piece. Having an understanding of different types of ways to be flexible, transferable skills, so on and so forth. And so really kind of seeing this blend between personal growth and professional growth, and how can we really help our employees grow as people, so they can bring them their full selves to the institution every day, which is something very cool.
Points.
Yeah. So let's, I guess, let's, dive into Georgia State a little bit more here, really kind of going over the, 18 or 19 programs and certificates that you all offer. And maybe we can, even look at some of the components.
Okay. And I have to preface this description of our developing the asynchronous learning, is that, this was precipitated in crisis mode, if you will, during the pandemic and with the advent of COVID-19. And so that said, this has been sort of a medium to long-term goal, but I just had to give the caveat that we made this as an emergency to give the value and the content for our courses. So that said, each certificate we have represents about 6 to 8 courses with competencies based on Georgia State's strategic plan, staff development committee, online research, and the USG, the Board of Regents leadership competency model, and of course the Georgia State University staff survey that's done periodically for insight. So certificate programs that we offer, for instance, we have the first line supervisors certificate, administrative professionals, manager certificate, and aspiring leaders certificates. Okay? And professional development courses, they of course now employ LinkedIn Learning courses, which I've been sort of preaching for a while now. And these content areas, we've linked those to our courses and our larger certificate programs. So this, in combination with our learning management system, allows us to, in a relatively short time, last year, to offer these skills and these competencies and certificates to people who are willing to be online and lifelong learners, if you will.
Yeah. And I guess, and we'll certainly get to, some pieces on, hey, how did we really, kind of change this on the fly? Because I recall you had mentioned earlier, it took about 2 months, and hey, we got to get going, we got to move this, and everyone in the higher ed space has their stories, from, I guess you could say, March 2020 to about July 2020, and even moving on. But that was quite the hectic time. But and also, when we wrap up too, want to kind of talk about what the future looks like at the program as we kind of do have this new return. There's a lot of different words for it right now: the new normal, the return to normal, whatever it may be. And as we kind of gear up for this upcoming school year, with the fall semester, but let's kind of look at it. What did it look like before 2020? How did what was the foundations of the program? What were some of the things you all were really seeking to instill with this? And it had been around for a number of years. So
Yes.
kind of want to let's paint a picture of what it originally looked like, and then what it we'll talk a little bit about COVID, and how that changed a few things, and then going into what does the future look like.
Sure. I'd be happy to respond to that. So I've been in my current position about 4 years now, and my colleague, Doug Samuels, who could be here today, has been here 8 to 10 years. And so I guess a quick picture of pre-COVID is that maybe a couple of points. One is that we were relying on external instructors, consultants, and content experts to help us deliver content in areas of professional development, whether it's time management, presentation skills, and these type of mainly soft skills that are prevalent in the industry. And so one of the components before I arrived was sort of the development of getting staff to fully engage with professional development as a resource and as a day-to-day goal and long-term goal. And so once the culture has been implemented, then there's more buy-in from not just from students who are our staff members, but from top down also, from directors, and with the importance that professional development is an important goal, for everyone to keep up their skills and their credentials. Mm-hmm. And so alongside that, again, we were relying on some robust face-to-face content, and of course, pre-COVID, in our training room and other places on Georgia State's campus, we would map out the physical landscape of delivering courses and employing experts to deliver content in a face-to-face format for staff members. And so that's sort of the pre-pandemic landscape that we painted, and so of course, as we mentioned before, not just us, but many other institutions and higher education areas being able to pivot from face-to-face. We had the choice of either discontinuing temporarily L&D programs, or continuing them in some way that was sort of safe for learners. Right.
And I guess, yeah, we can get to the big event, if you will, just kind of like when it hit. COVID hit, and right around March 2020, and the program was moved online. I mean, as the kind of the topic and the theme and the title of what we're talking about today is enrollment double. So that's a big thing. So kind of want to talk about that. But let's first kind of talk about the development with, what steps did you take? How did the curriculum change? How long did the conversion take? And, what were some of the surprises? What were some of the things that, maybe went more smoothly than anticipated? So you can always, have good outcomes from crisis changes. So yeah, let's just kind of talk about how, on the fly you redeveloped it, kind of changed it, and made it grow exponentially too.
Yes, yes. So initially and I didn't mention this off camera when we met earlier,
Mhm.
but earlier in the development, say March, we were still in the mode of employing external instructors, and so we sort of pivoted in a couple of ways. And so the first step was that we still had external instructors who were on board, and so we sort of train them in some ways to train the trainer to engage with our current students in our pre-COVID environment, but still moving to the online area, since we were not able to deliver on campus. And so the second area was moving more to the content area specialization from that LinkedIn Learning offers. And so this allowed us to pivot even more, so to be sort of agile with all the myriad courses that are available on LinkedIn Learning. And so that opened up a different area of opportunity, if you will, for
Mhm.
our students. And so it's sort of in the nascent stages, if you will, of development for our L&D program. So if you think long term, which we can talk about maybe a little bit later
Mhm.
today, is that we have some different ideas of how we can sort of be agile and not keep the same environment we have now with LinkedIn Learning as a partner with our program. And so, but yeah, I have to say that I'm not alone in that, in terms of institutions and private organizations and higher education, that it was a critical time of trying to, in emergency mode, to deliver similar or same content or programs in this way where we're only connected now face to face through computers. And
Mhm.
so whether that was a long time coming from decades of that's where society is going, but made apparent in last year, we made the choice to continue with stepped up programs using LinkedIn Learning's videos and other content components that we put in our courses. And so we wanted to not make it wholesale different from our pre-COVID courses, but also continue the value. And speaking of the value, of course, if any of our students are remembering before March 2020, is that largely our courses that we had external instructors, those funds that we used to pay the instructors came from departmental funds. So the other part of the value, given this development in crisis, is that we're able, since all staff, faculty, and students have access to LinkedIn Learning on campus as part of their routines, we're able to incorporate that without adding any cost to our development of these programs. So that was a great bonus.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, and definitely kind of want to talk about, the combination of resources a little bit too, with the existing resources and kind of this blended learning, to really kind of make, it almost a unique Georgia State experience. So, in addition to the LinkedIn components, what were some kind of additional aspects of the program or programs?
Well, I have to say that even though we pivoted, it seemingly overnight, which
Yeah.
wasn't overnight, to our current program right now, the asynchronous learning, I personally and some of my colleagues do miss, and I'm sure some of the staff and faculty who take our courses miss the face-to-face. And so in the hopefully near future, we're going to pivot more again to have some face-to-face blended plus the online content and sort of meeting, again, with your earlier question about meeting people with their professional development targets that are moving. We know that some people prefer face-to-face content only. And we all well know from research and from personal preferences that we only went online. And so I always mention people they can learn in their pajamas, they can learn in their break time. And so I think that meeting some people with their preferences, whether face-to-face, online, or in a blended scenario, hopefully that's going to be one of our next pivots, so we can sort of meet people where they want to be learning.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of meeting people where they are and kind of where they're going, let's talk a little bit about marketing this change. That's routinely one of the things, the million-dollar question in higher ed is, how do we get this information out to our community, whether it's student specific, staff specific. How do we just make folks aware that we have these PD programs or whatever it may be, but we're talking professional development today, these PD programs on campus. How did you market the change? How do you kind of even just market the program in general?
Good question. Luckily, a shout out to Elma Clark also with you guys in LinkedIn. She works in tandem with us, and so her focus, of course, LinkedIn Learning as our campus representative has been instrumental, because she will send out emails, broadcast in different ways, different departments, and through the larger campus to just advertise different changes that LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning offer. And so different learning paths, different courses, and different changes that have flexed. Now, I'm sure people who are in tune to LinkedIn Learning will know that almost immediately you saw content that changed with the pandemic. And so there's there content, with wellness and development, as you mentioned before, but also different platforms, getting people used to online learning, things like this. And so that's been one of the challenges that we didn't have to touch, because we're gifted to have our partner with Elma and LinkedIn. And so alongside that, we had to do some internal changes in terms of because I guess we were targeting mainly people who attended our classes and courses in the past. Mm-hmm. And so those were the main people who would get our reminders and updates about changes in courses in the past. And so one of the larger focuses that we had realized that, given that we have more than 3,000, plus staff, not even including faculty, that to reach a larger audience, we partnered with our marketing department in Georgia State within our main department of human resources, but in the larger marketing department in Georgia State, to get our message out to the larger audience. And so I think that, to level the playing field, whether you're faculty interested in professional development, whether you're a student worker, whether you're a staff member, everyone has the opportunity, one, to harness the opportunities in LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning, same time to use that partnership with our courses. They want to sort of up their skills and development.
Yeah, definitely. And for folks on the line in the Q&A chat, if anyone has any questions kind of about and we'll get to them certainly at the end, about marketing strategies or even success stories. Always love to hear success stories. I'm sure Jim would like to learn about some tactics as well, whether it's a professional development program or a student focus item on campus. Always looking to kind of connect colleges and universities to one another on different marketing success standpoints. So kind of going.
If I could add one thing,
go ahead. Of
course, being a lifelong learner, I mean, being, if you will, the silo of Georgia State, that's one thing, but I'd be interested to hear if anyone has outside knowledge, or if they're coming from a different university, is to sort of to partner with other universities to see what their staff and faculty would like to learn. Because, we can learn all we can at Georgia State for one thing, even though that's rather unlimited. I would like to sort of know different trends and feedback from other staff and faculty of what they're interested in learning in terms of upping their professional development. So as we go forward, I mean, I'd love to hear more ideas for that too.
Yeah, definitely. We can get the Q&A and the chat going for sure. So I guess too, a lot of times there's professional development struggles in terms on campus sometimes, just in terms of 24 hours in a day. I think we all could wish we had 25, but a common, kind of across the board is, hey, I don't have time to invest in these types of things just because I'm already swamped at work. And, there is kind of that balance of, well, if you invest in yourselves, maybe take some extra time, find the time, or, kind of do these different certificates and programs kind of in bite-sized chunks, an hour here, hour there. In the long run, the goal is hopefully you'll become more efficient, and you will get more time in your day, and you'll be able to get things done, kind of in a more seamless fashion. But with these programs specifically at Georgia State, and one thing that schools are always trying to do with their employees is, how do we really create this culture of learning? And sometimes it's well, do we make things voluntary? Do we make things mandatory? So would like to kind of see, with your program specifically, Jim, are these voluntary, or are employees required for a certain number of hours, or kind of, and just culture of learning in general amongst your employees? Any learnings there?
This is my just honest opinion, but this question, these questions that you posed here, this to me, for our purpose here today in this hour we have, is probably almost like the heart of what my passion is, because I am all on you in terms of culture of learning. That is a short and medium and long-term goal for any L&D program, right? And at the same time, the idea of, you mentioned before this, the idea of those pockets of learning we try to put in there during lunchtime or breaks and after hours. I really struggle with this. And so what I've come up with, just this is my personal thing, and I'm blessed to have colleagues on my TMO, our talent management office, and others in HR who subscribe to the idea of that professional development is important. So I think that given that idea, that's important to have on your team. And so if not, it takes some time and some changes to make that important for everyone. But secondly, getting the time. And so personally, what I've changed, one thing recently, is that I'll put down a block of time on my calendar. And so other colleagues in my team, they know, and they can see my calendar. They know that Jim has some professional development time, because otherwise I like to practice what I preach, for the most part. And so if I'm telling other people these courses are very valuable, it's something missing. At the same time, having those micro learning moments, whether it's half an hour, I put those in my calendar. So I encourage people to invest time in yourself, because I know that everyone's busy in the different areas they are of specialization. At the same time, there's only, like you mentioned, only a certain time in the day. And so you have to sort of almost force yourself, if you want to learn some more and keep your skills relevant, that you have to invest that time for yourself. And so having that culture within your team and department and the larger university is important. So I think that we've made some progress in the past several years to make professional development and L&D important. The second step is creating those spaces of opportunity where we actually can learn in those times. So
yeah, and I do the exact same thing, and it's just kind of becomes routine. I set little learning goals for myself, making sure that I'm at least doing 45 minutes of my own professional development, and then even on the weekends, making sure I'm doing some personal development, that I can grow not only in my work life but my family life, and so on and so forth, because those learnings can definitely be applied, and vice versa, as you kind of go about it. And I just have a reoccurring calendar invite, Friday afternoons, generally a little slower, so I can, take 45 minutes, invest in myself. And, once you kind of get in the flow of it, it becomes quite easy. And you do see, hey, I'm able to accomplish different tasks, whether it's I needed to brush up on a software piece, or I wanted to kind of practice my communication skills and how that works, which you can practice communication skills on your own. That's something unique I found, which I never really thought of it like that before. But especially since, this is kind of a voluntary program even. And,
exactly.
You're finding, hey, and it might just be because sometimes folks, well, yeah, I was on campus all day and I was doing physical things on campus, and now I have a little extra time. I mean, that the opposite story was true for some folks. You know, some oh, okay, I'm working at home all day, and now I find myself doing 14-hour days. But now I'm, you know, and on the vice versa, some folks are working at home and they find themselves doing 4-hour days. So do you think kind of, you know, some of that downtime help contribute to this and really help folks understand like, okay, this is, you know, I do have some extra time here. I'm investing in these programs, you know, and I'm learning the value of building my own professional brand and development. Do you think that aspect influenced at all, especially since it's voluntary, or any other kind of, you know, guesses, hypotheses?
Yes, if I can add my 2 cents to that item,
Mhm.
I think that this touches upon another, I guess maybe a challenge for myself. I'm not sure for the wider audience for today and university at large. However, spending the time you have to develop your own skills is one thing. And of course, to answer your question, our programs are totally voluntary. At the same
Mhm.
time, we do partner with departments, directors, managers of that nature. And our office does coach individuals and departments for improving their skills and moving the needle, if you will. So given that we do in those partnerships, some directors and departments, they sort of quote unquote send, that's not the right term, but they encourage their employees and staff members to take certain courses or enroll in certain specific programs. And we welcome all those encouragements because that's more learning going on. Same time, we also know that even if someone is encouraged to attend any course or develop some skills through a program, it's based on the individual. And so there's only so much learning you can do if some person's not motivated or is too busy, something like that. And so that goes to, again, the heart of our reason of being here today, is that you can develop a program that hopefully meets people where they are, whether at work or at home, on the weekends. The other thing is like, how much can you learn in that time? Because, you know, there's only a certain number of hours in a day, and also how much energy we have at the end of the day of working with our main work. And so again, I struggle with that, and I know that I'm sure a lot of the people here today in our webinar and university at large struggle with the idea of the balance, because, you know, trying to practice what you preach of always being ahead of the curve of technology and updates and skills, same time getting it done with your work that's the challenge.
Well, I think it's too, it's almost a conception at times, like, um, how do I get busy with professional development? Like, I'm already busy, but I can get, you know, to add to this busyness, like, be busy with your own development is kind of a concept and the $1,000,000 question. But I think in one aspect that you touched upon, especially, you know, at a very, very large university like Georgia State, is the importance of, when you have programs like this, multi-threading it, making sure that, you know, various various levels of management and leadership are aware that these things exist, so they can promote, and they can come from, you know, many different areas and different angles. I think that leads to a lot of success, helps, you know, really justify investments that are made in resources, time, whatever it may be, and very, very important to, you know, kind of have that occur, the awareness, the multi-threading, because for the most part, and a lot of times, the larger the college or university, the more decentralized you are. So it can be quite a heavy lift, and quite a big task to say, hey, you know, making sure every area is aware of this is going on. It is a voluntary program, but hey, maybe you're you know, a manager of someone, and you're going through a performance review or something like that, and it's like, okay, well, what are the next steps? Always, you know, we can talk all day long, but next steps sometimes seem to be a lost art. And if this is, you know, aware, it's like, it's a solid next step after of, hey, we're developing your career together, as, you know, me being your manager or whatever it may be, and here's something you can do to develop your career. And I think that ties into, once again, this larger, let's build a concept or a culture of learning, amongst everyone. And then once again, it's like, okay, it's not me adding on additional professional development time. It's actually just part of my, review process, which is already something that's integrated, folks are used to. So then kind of that myth of it being, oh, this is something additional I have to do. It's like, no, we're just kind of tweaking something I've already been doing. So could be kind of,
if you don't mind, I can add one thing.
Of course.
And to tie in something that in the past several years, having my relationship with Elma is that when we onboard new employees, we're excited to have their skills and their experience. I've partnered with Elma many times with the idea that, using or leveraging the content and skills that you find in LinkedIn Learning, for instance, and also not just LinkedIn Learning, because we know that there's a myriad of opportunities online with courses and content. But the idea I'd like to focus on is that I know that there's performance management and there's work-related tasks and skills that you can learn to make your job easier, more efficient, and all those things. And we all, as employees of an organization, value those skills, right? Because faster, cheaper, better. But at the same time, learning from Elma and the content in LinkedIn Learning is that people can have side creativity. People can have side hobbies that enrich our lives. And so whether it's enrichment in terms of communication skills that you're trying to learn, whether it's foreign language skills, whether it's software, whether it's other soft skills, these, in my idealistic mind, add to the creativity and the input and output that you'll get in your work and outside work. And so I know that seems rather idealistic, but I know that, once the workday finishes, whenever that is at 5 or 8 or midnight, in some cases, that you do have a life outside of work. And so the skills and development you employ to enrich your life with your families, your friends, that's also important. So if organizations and ourselves, we preach the idea of work-life balance, you really have to sort of get the idea that opportunities you find online to enrich your learning is not just for your work, for day-to-day, which is important, but also outside of work.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I've definitely developed skills that just a personal interest, or, I kind of want to explore this hobby. And then a year later, something down the line, something pops up at work where, on our team, that skill's needed. It's like, oh, wow, I can help out with that and chip in there. So
the value add is outstanding, and the opportunities are limitless because you can add so much to the dialogue and creativity of ideas.
Yeah, and and even too, when you're talking about transferable skills or soft skills, and it's even an idea that I've seen some schools that I partner with kind of toy around with, like, how do we just market this not as training, but or not personal development, professional development, but just as overall learning? Because communication skills, those are applicable at work, and they're applicable when you're talking to your kids. It's two birds with one stone on that. So just want to keep an eye on the time here. I think from a visual component, why don't we just kind of do a deep dive into, and Elma, share the screen here, please, on the Aspiring Leader Certificate. We could just, spend a couple minutes walking through what we're looking at here, and kind of showing folks, hey, this is how it's rolled out at Georgia State, specifically too with the badge and the certificate and how you incorporate that, because badging and certificates are very, very hot topic in higher ed. And I think, one of the questions a lot of folks have is, okay, like, we have this idea of how badges will work for students, and what we really want to do with them to help with their post-graduation success, but it can really tie into, building this culture of learning amongst employees. So I very, very curious a little bit more too on how you use a badging system in a professional development program.
Absolutely. And so this on the screen that people can see now, the Aspiring Leaders, that's just one of the 4. Actually, we have 5 too for face-to-face certificates we have. But the badge you see here, and again, I've mentioned this many times, face-to-face and online as an opportunity for some people. And at the same time, I recognize the idea that some people, whether they're tapped into social media or recognition or engagement, they may not, worry so much about digital credentials, if you will, which is another name for badges. But at the same time, there's a large body of learners that they just don't want to just learn in a vacuum. They want to learn and showcase that to others. And so for skill development, if you can imagine, what are ways we can actually prove that we've learned a skill, whether it's communication wise or software or other skills. So you can take a test, an assessment like this, or you can go through some different processes. Again, it's not the only way, but one way to showcase a skill development or an attainment of education or certificate program is a digital badge. And so I, of course, have a collection of paper certificates and graduate degrees and things like this. But again, the value is how much people know that do your work, and not just by name and sight. But this is just one of the many ways that people can show others, whether it's on LinkedIn Learning or on a digital resume or a CV or just from social media, that this badge, and it's, again, it looks just like a sticker, but if one knows about digital credentials, there's metadata behind this. And so once you tap into this, and of course we partner, we have with Credly and currently with Badger, one of the leading opportunities for credentials and online learning, is that you can showcase this. And once people know that this is a digital credential, they know that there's coursework and there's competencies and assessments behind this. It's not just a sticker. Yeah. So we have 4 to 5 competencies, rather certificate programs based upon competencies and feedback from staff and other avenues I mentioned before that sort of feed into the certificate programs, where if people want to learn in a public environment and showcase their learning, this is one way they can do that.
Yeah, definitely. And, it just kind of ties into demonstrating skills in a plethora of ways, kind of getting different viewpoints on a certain skill. So, maybe we'll use communication as an example, where, okay, to obtain, a badge like this, you're going to have to, take some face-to-face trainings. You're going to have to do some items with LinkedIn Learning. But then, I've even seen it utilized in some cases where, okay, those are 2 of the 3 check boxes, and the third check box is you're going to have to implement this skill into your day-to-day for the next month, and then kind of talk about and submit how you actually utilize that skill in a real world practice. Because consuming content and having discussions about it is great, but always taking that next step is kind of the end goal. And I have seen that kind of develop around badges to say, hey, if you're going to obtain this badge, there is a execution component to it as well, which really kind of helps. Once again, we're trying to develop folks so they become more efficient in their day-to-day personal life, professional life, and really saying, hey, you've taken it the next step, and hopefully it's going to pay dividends on that, in terms
if
of
I could add, Wes, if you don't mind,
yeah,
to that notion of actually proving what you've learned. And so that's one thing that we had started pre-COVID, and we need to sort of re-engage and make this maybe more robust, is that this certificate program we have for administrative professional certificate, we evolved this one pre-COVID to a next level, if you will. And so that box you mentioned, that to check off whether we actually employ those skills on the workplace, behavior wise, we had a relationship with directors and managers and supervisors to actually see if the individuals who took those courses and entered this program did actually change their behavior. And so in any case, this is one of the ongoing things that we're going to push in the near and future, to see not just did you learn something, but did you engage with it and find success with it, that skill in the workplace. Yeah,
definitely. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the bottom line there. So, and just kind of being mindful of time too, let's talk about, the future of the program. And we've touched upon it a little bit, but, to finish up, any lessons learned, what does the future kind of look like? And any advice you have for folks that, may have a program in place, but are trying to tweak it a little bit to be similar to this one. Or, folks, hey, we haven't really done much with professional development. I don't even know where to start. So, kind of any advice for folks in that realm.
Well, I didn't mention that. I should have early in the program today, but I wanted to say that moving from one program to the next, if that's the evolution in organization, if it's at least possible in terms of budget wise, having a learning management system, that's one thing, one tool case can have. Having the content, that's another sort of big piece in terms of having some of the content that people want to actually learn about. But the other thing I'd mention is having the robust instructional design, if you will, of the course. And so that's one of the current and future goals we have, is to make our programs a little bit more robust, because as you mentioned, people can learn or not, or in between video content in a certain environment. Same time, I think one of the challenges we have, and so the opportunities we have, maybe advice to another program, is to also keep in mind in this environment, if in current state of either hybrid or remote work, is to remember the engagement piece. And so that's one thing that I can't wait to, once I get on campus more consistently, is to seek out people I've found that have taken our courses, meet them face to face for coffee, meet them if need be online through LinkedIn Learning. LinkedIn. And so to continue the conversation we have through learning in the day-to-day and beyond with friendships. So I think that engagement piece is going to be really important to sort of tap into, because some universities and some organizations will maintain working from home, things like this. And so for a long term, I would believe that missing that engagement piece, the face-to-face part, and the social aspect of learning is going to be important.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, I guess I'm seeing the Q&A and chat fill up here, and we got a few minutes left, so
okay.
We'll turn it over to Anna and kind of see some of the questions that popped up.
Sure thing, and that was actually a great segue to our first question. So we have a question here. In regards to various constituencies, which group did you find was the most receptive to taking advantage of virtual learning? Also, what techniques did you use to engage the audience or get them connecting with each other utilizing the content?
Well, I have to say, one of the sort of hidden surprises I've found very recently, even though we started in 2020, is getting more involvement, engagement with faculty, because our whole mission and goal of our unit in HR is to develop staff in terms of L&D. But since this is employable for any environment on campus, we welcome student workers, we welcome faculty. And so I've noticed recently that there are more and more faculty that at the same time are lifelong learners, and also at the same time, some employ in their department, student workers and graduate assistants that they have to also manage too. And so having those people skills, the soft skills, things like this, that not exactly are in line day to day with teaching classes as a faculty member, but also having the opportunity to sort of to flex where the students are. And so I think that has been a pleasant surprise to me. But I do enjoy the idea that this is for the broader audience, and so it's exciting.
Great, thanks. And then our next question was about the technology. So we had a question here, and you had mentioned this, but are you using an LMS, a learning management system? And if so, there's some interest in how you go about curating the content from LinkedIn Learning, combining it with other knowledge sources as you go through your course development process.
Yes, and so our LMS, or learning management system, is Canvas, and we've began employing this a few years ago, I believe. And so in working with our different departments on campus, also Robinson College of Business, they employ this LMS. And so, well, I have to say this is not tailored to us, and so it's not as agile as we'd like it to be. we are working with what we have and offering the value to our staff members. So that said, we're using the LMS, of course, as a sort of a structure to help sort of house the content we have. And then I mentioned earlier, the other piece is the content. And so our main partner, of course, is LinkedIn Learning, getting video content. And also there's a myriad of other things besides videos that they do offer in terms of worksheets and connections with the actual instructors. Same time, I mentioned before that everyone knows that online content is widely available. And so we've employed TED Talks, we've employed research and other things that sort of help the learner, whichever skill that they're addressing, whether it's presentation skills. I know that's difficult with online learning, but I know it is possible. And what other soft skills that we do offer.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And that'll wrap up our Q&A for today. We had a couple of idea shares in the chat that I encourage people to look at as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anna.
Cool. I think, yep, there we go.
Yeah, I was just getting my screen ready. Well, thank you, Jim and Wes. This was very engaging, very, very informative. I know for some of my customers who I see in the participant list there. So I'm sure a lot of the information that was shared today will be very valuable to others. And I want to thank everyone for attending today and appreciate everyone being here. Before we wrap up, I just have a few announcements. We will be taking a break for August, just to sort of recoup and of course do a lot of action planning for the fall. So we're going to allow everyone to sort of focus on that and take a break for the fall. But we will be back in September for a full lineup of our monthly higher education leaders webinar series, showcasing folks. Again, thank you, Jim, our thought leaders. We'll be starting back up in September, as I mentioned, and we'll be starting with one of our thought leaders here. You see on my screen, Christopher Taylor, and he'll be covering the subject of career exploration through the lens of the equity, diversity, inclusion, and career services in higher education. So I'm hoping that you'll, once we promote these, or if you go to our site where we have these posted, you know, go ahead and register or share these with across your organization. I want to again thank Jim for filling in at the last minute. We really appreciate it. Again, this was very informative. I know I learned a lot myself that I can share with my customers, and look forward to continuing this journey with Georgia State as you evolve into the next phase. Wes, my colleague, thank you so much for the very engaging conversation and discussion that you both have. Again, I want to thank everyone for your attendance today and for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next Higher Education Leaders webinar. You all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Alpha. Thanks, Wes. Thanks, Anna. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Jim. Appreciate it.
Take care.
See ya.
Okay.